In 1930, former Assistant Secretary of the Colored Musicians Club, Local 533, Clara Clavette was stricken with illness and unable to work. Stressed, confused, and lost were only a few emotions Clavette felt during that time in her life. And with the help of Local 533, she survived those challenging years. In February of 1931, Local 533 held a dance to raise money. Not only did the dance proceeds help Clavette and her family, but the dance itself benefited the entire Black community. Clavette is only one of the many people that benefited from a predominantly Black organization in that area. Local 533 participated in many community service activities, such as performing locally for charitable organizations like the Young Men Christian Association, known as YMCA. Local 533 ensured that the Black community was assisted economically as well as socially by providing entertainment that relieved Blacks of the economic challenges of their day. Prior to the Civil Rights Act, 1965, Blacks had no other alternative but to be separate. In 1935, Local 533 was birthed, a musicians union for predominantly Blacks. Local 533 made the best out of their situation and segregation by contributing to jazz and the Black culture as a whole. Post-1965, the American Federation of Musicians mandated the whites-only Club of Buffalo, Local 43, and 533 to merge. However, forced integration between Local 43 and 533 was not as effective as intended. Once the clubs merged, the Black musicians felt they had no voice and were not able to find employment. As a result, the Black musicians maintained a separate club to find gigs to play for and continued their philanthropy work in their community and are known today as the Colored Musicians Club. When the use of Local 533, that is the musicians union prior to 1969, and when it is referred to Colored Musicians Club, then it is post-1969. Black musicians decided to stay separate from the whites in evidence that forced integration does not influence people to accept each other's culture, but instead it leads to separatism among the races by choice. 3 journal articles that all argue that the benefits of having segregated musicians union allowed the Black musicians to preserve their culture. William F. Caton argued that even though club members from Local 43 and 533 had different viewpoints on the forced integration between the two clubs, ultimately, if it was not for Local 533's unique identity and legacy, the history of Black musicians would have been lost. Richard McKay wrote a journal article on the history of the Colored Musicians Club, Local 533, in 1996 that summarizes and adds new information to the previous journal articles written in 1957. Richard McKay argued that the Colored Musicians Club, Local 533, played a substantial role in preserving the traditions of Buffalo's Black culture. Lastly, Buffalo was not the only place where separate musicians occurred during the 20th century. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, musician unions Local 471, Blacks only, and Local 60, Whites only, remained separate until 1967. And once integrated, the Black musicians' presence in the newly local disappeared. They believed the only way for Black musicians to preserve their voice was to remain separate. In San Francisco, California, Black musicians felt powerless and sued the predominantly white musicians, Local 6, and established their own musician unions in 1945. However, similar to Buffalo and Pittsburgh, San Francisco's locals were forced to merge, and Black musicians felt like they were underrepresented. Before the merge, Local 533 was financially stable and musically/culturally different. Previous member of Local 43 White Musicians Union, Anthony Piccolo, was interviewed and he pointed out a key reason why both locals were hesitant about merging. Piccolo believed that Local 533 and 43 never merged prior to 1969 because rumors had spread that Local 533 had $50,000 in the bank. Piccolo thought that Local 533 did not want to share their wealth with Local 43, whom had less income. A hindrance to merging was Local 533's desire to preserve their hard-earned money, which also shows how financially well-off they were as a separate club. Piccolo also believed another reason why there was a delay in the merges between both clubs was the different types of music each club favored. Conrad Topher Jr. was one of the few white musicians in Local 533. He expressed his thoughts about merging with Local 43 through an interview. Topher explained multiple times that he was questioned by Local 43 members on his reasoning behind joining Local 533. He told Local 43 members that many of his friends were in Local 533, and he wanted to be with them. Topher believed many Local 43 members were jealous of Local 533 because they did not have as many good musicians as Local 533. He also expressed that many of Local 43 members were racist and did not understand jazz. He stated, "If you understand jazz, you can never be a racist." Meaning that many white musicians played and liked jazz, but rarely took the time to understand the people and struggles behind the style of the genre. Local 533 benefited as an independent club because they were allowed to monitor their spending as money as well as control the music they wanted to play. During the process of integrating unions of both Local 43 and 533, it was not favored by the very same organization that had forced the integration. The American Federation of Musicians, AFM, was pressured to integrate all separate clubs under their leadership when cities such as Los Angeles, Chicago, and Pittsburgh merged. The AFM sent a letter in November of 1968 to Local 533 and 43 members. The letter explained to both locals that they were officially mandated to merge. Even though AFM ordered the mergence, the letter also stated that AFM regretted having to order integration. This shows that integration was not wanted from the same club that was promoting it, and that AFM only ordered mergence to satisfy the Civil Rights Act. Leaders of both locals were also advised to inform their members immediately to prevent conflict when both clubs were to meet to discuss rules and regulations of the newly formed club, Local 92. However, the AFM failed to suggest any strategies or ideals to take after both clubs were to merge. After reviewing the minutes of Local 43 from 1968, once again, it is clear that majority of the club members did not want to merge. Local 43 members discussed at their meeting to raise initiation fee for Local 533 members. Local 43 thought by making the black musicians pay more to join Local 92, that they would be less willing to join. After days of a negotiating agreement form, both locals came to a consensus. Many black musicians believed that Local 92 was a failure, so they maintained their own club, the Colored Musicians Club. Many of the club members were previous members of Local 533. One may ask why Local 533 members separate themselves from the newly integrated Musicians Club. Willie J. Dorsey, a former member of Local 533, expressed his thoughts on the failure of Local 92. He believed that Local 43 members had no more electoral power than Local 533 members because they were more of them. He also felt that the integrated local was cliquish and the majority of the jobs were given to the white musicians over African Americans. Dorsey pointed out key issues with Local 92. All jobs went to the white musicians, and the black musicians had no vote or employment under the integrated local. Understanding the failures of Local 92 helps us understand why the Colored Musician Club currently remains as an organization today. After the merged local, black musicians decided to take matters into their own hands. In 1979, Local 533 bought a building and created the separate club, Colored Musicians Club, which still exists today and represents jazz as well as the memories of black musical culture in Buffalo. The club symbolizes jazz because the majority of the musicians of Local 533 specialize in playing that genre. Many memories were established in the black community about the club because it also fundraised and gave back to their neighborhood. The club was a highlight for many African Americans in Buffalo because of its rich history and continual support to the community. Jazz became a symbol of black culture. It displayed love, unity, and identity all in one. Many famous jazz musicians of the 1940s played in the Colored Musicians Club, and it gave local people pride in their city. The club was a place that blacks can call their own, and even after the merge, the building was still owned by black musicians. The fact that Local 533 did not sell their location with the locals combined made it possible for the black musicians to have a separate place from the white musicians and maintain their own organization's identity again. Essentially, what we can learn through Local 533's history is that forced integration is not as effective as intended. The mindset of people must change in order for integration to work. People must be willing to accept one another's differences and ensure everyone's voice is being heard. As you think about the civil rights movement, many people fought so that their voices may be heard, that their concerns, issues, and challenges will be understood. It is important for us as a people to listen the next time we disagree with someone and try to understand their point of view.